Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. Brought to you by the fine people at Polyhymnia. Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week? And I'm just going to warn you before you even start that if what's new and exciting in your world is also what's new and exciting in my world, we're going to throw down.
Oh, I doubt it is. I'm going to talk about space.
Well, there you go. It's never happened that we've chosen the same thing. We've both showed up having chosen nothing.
Right, yes. I occasionally just forget that I'm supposed to do this.
But okay, if we have to go back to property rights on the that word I'm not allowed to say moon, then okay. Here, have at it.
Well, before I start, I want to give a shout out to listeners Pat and Kathleen Park. I got a call, as I do in my new life here, to go out to Kansas and give a talk for my new employer on the things I talk about. And I got note back that two of the people involved with my talk out there are looking forward to me coming out. They enjoy listening to the podcast, to which I just naturally assumed it was my employer's podcast because I do a once every 3 week episode there.
And nobody enjoys that.
They're Words and Numbers listeners. It was great.
Yeah, that sounds more like
so
it.
My two worlds collide.
Not that your other podcast is horrible. It's just, kind of dry.
Well, it's for a particular niche audience. It's not more general like Words and Numbers.
It lacks, what's that word I'm looking for?
You. It lacks you.
James, that's right. It lacks me. That's exactly right. Anyway.
So my interesting thing this week, and I've been watching this for a number of years, there's technology that's evolving that enables you to transmit power wirelessly. And you could, I don't know if you still can, but at least as of 2 years ago, you could buy these devices and you plug one in one place and one another and transmit energy via microwave or something. And apparently there's a lot of loss, but that's all beside the point. The interesting thing is there have been advances now in this technology such that researchers anticipate we're going to be able to put satellites in orbit that are basically solar collectors. And of course, being in orbit as a solar collector, you're getting 2 to 3 times as much energy as you get on Earth, and you're getting it 24/7 because you don't go into the night side of Earth. Collect this energy, beam it down. So in effect, we would have a bunch of power generating stations in space, beaming the power down to Earth. And I'm thinking about it in terms of my newfound life where we deal with rural electrification. And while I can imagine that upsetting power generation, I don't imagine it's going to have any effect on power distribution, because beaming the power down is not like you're going to beam it to every individual house. You're going to have to beam it to some central location that then distributes it out to houses along conventional wires.
That's interesting business.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing we could be looking forward to in the next 10 to 20 years.
The thing that revolutionizes everything is never the thing that people were looking for in the first place.
Right. It's always something out of left field.
That's right. And, who cares if there's massive loss from there to here? It was all free anyway.
Right. So you lose, whatever it is. They claim it's 5% power loss. I'm sure that in practice it's going to be more than that.
Oh, I'm sure it's way, way more than that. But nonetheless, who really cares, right?
Right.
As long as the collection mechanism doesn't cost infinite dollars.
Right, yeah.
Should work out okay.
This takes me back to an episode we recorded maybe a couple of years ago with Lynn Kiesling. Do you recall that?
I remember. I was just thinking about that the other day, actually.
Yeah, she came on and was talking about energy, and one of the big points that she made that I hadn't appreciated up till then was that you shouldn't rely on a single power source. You need a portfolio of power sources. Some nuclear, some wind, some solar, some whatever else, because none of them are going to be working 24/7 all the time.
Yeah, if only we could extend that logic to the distribution service. But we're never getting multiple distribution networks in place given the history that we've got. But Ant, all of this raises a very interesting question for me. when the hell am I going to be able to put my printer in my closet?
Put it in your closet?
Yeah, you started by explaining that we can beam electricity from one place to another. I have any number of problems in my own house that I have to put things where the outlets are.
Yeah.
I don't want to put things where the outlets are. I want to put things where I want them.
Well, isn't that interesting? You can imagine at some point in the future, people having houses with these things in the wall. People say, what is this? Well, that's an electrical outlet.
We used to use those.
Yeah, you used to have to plug into the wall.
Kind of like phones, right?
Right. Well, that's the thing I was going to say. Any listener who thinks that's strange, James and I grew up with the phone attached to the wall.
Yeah.
It would never occur to anybody that you could, take it with you and drive down the road.
That's just a bunch of crazy drug talk right there.
Right.
I mean, that was the stuff of science fiction.
Yeah.
Look, I'm interested. Where this all leads, I don't know. But it's interesting. Also interesting is that crackpot, ne'er-do-well autocrat Javier Milei. Did you see him visiting the Pope?
No. Now, hang on. He's president of Venezuela?
Argentina.
Argentina.
He's the one who implemented all of the classical liberal approaches to economic things.
Yes.
And turned an entire country around, even though everybody there said it would never work.
Yep.
Well, he went and visited the Pope yesterday and brought him a copy of Hayek's Fatal Conceit.
Oh, superb.
So not only did he go visit the Pope, he showed up with pretty good books. He brought some by De Soto as well. So,
man, if I had seen that coming, I would have sent him a dozen copies of our book. Just for giggles, maybe.
Well, maybe we could just send him straight to the Pope.
Well, I've tried that before. I get no response.
You sent the Pope a book?
Francis, yeah.
Well, Francis couldn't read. Let's try this one. Yeah, cue up the hate mail. I don't care. I got so much hate mail over Pope Francis, I don't even care. You go right ahead. Fire up your fountain pens and let me have it good. Which, of course, Aunt, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And I try to keep the foolishness fresh. There's always something stupid going on in the world, right? Always. I always say that politicians are the gift that keeps right on giving. You can't go a week without having something that's so incredibly stupid coming out of the nattering class or the ruling class. But today it's going to be the nattering class, because I've got, well, it's going to first be the nattering class and then be the ruling class, because I've got two headlines from two different news sources about the same story. Would you like to hear Fox or MSNBC first?
Let's do MSNBC first.
MSNBC says, "Do you even vote, bro? Democrats should look for new voters at the gym. Speaking with American Men is a Democratic initiative to win young men, a group Democrats lost ground with in 2024. All right.
I got nothing negative to say about that. I mean, if you're out there courting these guys, you're going to have to necessarily shift your platform a bit. I think that's going to be a good thing.
Well, perhaps, but our friends over at Fox, and I can just hear the sphincters constricting out there, because everybody knows that no matter what happens, I pick on Fox, and I'm somehow a closet Democrat, right? We've all heard these things. But Fox, for their part, here's their headline. Dems dropped $20 million on bizarre American men strategy in effort to dig out of 2024 political hole. Both of these things are talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it's let's be hip and trendy and court young male voters by going to the gym. Do you even vote, bro? Who the hell talks like that? And why are they as stupid as they apparently are? But then I have to tell you, Ant, I think the Fox headline much more carefully completely captures the essence of this story. The Democrats are spending $20 million on this goofy nonsense the Speaking with American Men Project, or SAM, as they like to call it, a bunch of fools, to figure out why it is that men have no use or less use with each apparent year for the Democratic Party.
Well, I mean, come on.
And if they would like that information, pennies on the dollar, they should give us a call.
They spent the past 20 years vilifying men.
And you're getting much further into this than is necessary. They're spending $20 million to figure out why they're a pack of morons. Well, I'll tell you for almost free. Not free, but almost free.
20 million's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. I look at it as a good thing that they're asking the question.
Come on, man.
We talked last episode about the need for the two parties to capture the center, to move more to the center, away from the edges. And look, if they take this seriously, it's going to push them in that direction.
Okay, they're not taking it seriously. They will never take it seriously. They think they already know what the problem is, and the problem isn't them, it's American men.
Oh, I see. They're not going out asking what's the problem with us. They're going out asking what's the problem with you.
Well, they are theoretically asking, but the way they behave, they're not looking for answers. They're looking to tell us what the right answer is, and the right answer apparently is Hillary Clinton. You always know what the right answer is, right? Because it's whatever they tried to accomplish not too long ago. So now the right answer would be Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd hold out hope that something good comes of this. Frankly, I'll tell you, the Republicans would do well to go out and talk to people that are voting principally Democrat and ask them, what have the Republicans done wrong?
You mean people who identify as women?
There's all sorts of groups that we could point to.
Oh, no, they got hammered by women, college-educated women especially.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that the Republicans and the Democrats are, in this sense, catching up to the libertarians. The libertarians for decades have been unable to understand what the common voter's looking for.
So it's a race to the bottom, not to the top, as is so often the case, and we'll see who's last to get there. But I do have to point out, Ant, that I don't know, man. Can we really take our cues from you? You are so out of touch that you don't even remember that last week's episode was Property Rights on the Moon.
I know it was Property Rights on the Moon. Why are you saying...
Well, you just said last week we talked about the parties and the Democrats.
Oh, that's right. It was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Har, har, har.
Yeah.
Anyway.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
What are we talking about today?
Well,
as I recall, it was something in the same neighborhood, right?
Yeah, I wanted to start off by mentioning, I was going to make this a quick hit, and then I thought maybe we could talk a little bit more about it, and that's the debt downgrade. And first off, I want to explain to people who maybe aren't following what's going on here. There are three major rating agencies, and one of the things that they do is they look at all of the bonds that are out there, the debt, and they stamp it just in the same way that you would have a credit rating, a credit score. These guys do the same thing for corporate bonds, for government bonds. And, you know, they have, whereas for credit scores, we have numbers that go up to whatever it is, 850, I think is the highest you can get. They have letters. So AAA is the highest that you can get, and it goes down from that. If you recall the discussion of junk bonds many years ago, junk bonds is one of the levels, it's like a C rating or something. But nonetheless, there are these three rating agencies, and independently, they will rate bonds, amongst them bonds issued by the U.S. government debt. And there was a big splash in the news back when Obama was president, 2011. Standard & Poor's, one of the three rating agencies, downgraded U.S. debt from its the highest level, which is a AAA, down one level. I think S&P's next level down was like AA plus or something. But the fact is, it was a downgrade. They were saying that the government's debt is less safe than what it was before. Then in 2023, just a couple of years ago, Fitch, the second of the three, downgraded the government's debt from AAA to the next level down. And now, just a couple of weeks ago, Moody's, the third of the three rating agencies, downgraded federal debt. So now all three of them are saying that of all the levels of debt safety, from the least safe to the most safe, U.S. federal debt used to be the most safe. Now all three of them agree it's one step down. And if you want to put this in perspective, Microsoft is rated AAA by all three. Microsoft's debt is considered safer than debt issued by the U.S. government. Now, you can ask, what does it mean practically? Well, one of the big practical implications is the interest rate. Just like if you get a downgrade in your credit score, you're going to have to pay more interest on your next car loan or your mortgage or whatever it is. So too here, we're going to see interest rates tick up on the federal government because of this.
I remember when the first time it happened in the Obama years, you and I, we talked a lot about it. And we said, well, it's clearly the harbinger of things to come, that you can't go on with your profligate spending like this with no hope of ever repaying back what you've borrowed in order to spend more every year. And then everybody just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, don't we forget about it. We went on borrowing more. I think that federal debt was half of what it is now back under Obama.
I think roughly speaking, yeah. So, where does it all end? I mean, we keep pointing out the unbelievable amount of irresponsibility that we see with government action, government spending more than it could ever hope to take in. We've pointed out repeatedly that there's roughly a 6-year lag between the government we can afford and the government that we think we can afford.
Yeah.
And nobody pays the least bit of attention. And it's getting kind of interesting right now, Ant, because we had all this Doge propaganda. And yes, I know what the word propaganda means, and yes, I know what Doge was. And we had lots and lots and lots of Doge propaganda. What do I mean? Doge would say, we found another X number of million people doing X thing, and now they're going to stop. But are they? Are they going to stop? Because nothing that X has done has been codified. Mm-hmm. Did you really pull hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people off the Social Security rolls? If so, who were they?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can I get a list of people who got checks last month, but then Doge intervened and they didn't get checks this month?
Let's do what you did back in COVID, when there were claims of all these millions of people dying of COVID, and you asked the question, how many people out there listening know somebody who died of COVID? Now, the answer today is different, but this was back in the early days of COVID. And so I would ask that question as well. How many people out there listening know somebody whose Social Security check was cut off? Because if indeed it's millions of people, one of us is going to know at least somebody.
But none of us do. And people will respond, of course, well, that's how clever the fraudsters are. No, it's not. Social Security fraud typically involves a Social Security card and a P.O. box. Mm-hmm. I mean, come on. And, Ant, it goes a little further, I think, right? Because one of the first things we heard, and the right-wing echo chamber had it nailed down within minutes, well, there are all these 120-year-old people on the Social Security rolls. Who are they? Can I see a list? When was the last time any of them got a check? Mm-hmm. Because I think it would make more sense if a bunch of dead people were still on a list somewhere. The really important list is how many of them got checks.
Right, yeah.
And we never heard an answer to that. Never.
I recall reading an article back then that said there's actually two lists. There's one of the ages which they're pointing to and saying, here's somebody who's 120 years old. But then there's another list that says the following people are dead, don't cut them checks. So my understanding is just because you're on the first list doesn't mean that you're getting a check.
Getting a check. And look, this gets interesting, right? Because I just cast aspersions at Doge, and had I done that 2 months ago, the MAGA right would have come for me with pitchforks. But given the tumult of the past week or so, now all of a sudden the MAGA right not so convinced that Elon Musk is really good at anything.
Yeah.
Why do they think this? Well, because their fearless leader and Big Toe told them to think this.
Yeah, and herein lies something interesting, I think. People talk about the power of billionaires. And you and I have said repeatedly that the power of consumers far eclipses the power of billionaires. And I think we have a good example of this here. Musk and Trump are in bed together from the beginning, and all of a sudden, Musk is distancing himself from Trump in serious ways. I claim that what happened is that people decided that they didn't like Musk anymore because he's cozying up to Trump, and therefore they're going to stop buying his cars. And his stock price tanked. It tanked so badly that his board of directors called him on the carpet and asked outright, what are you contributing to this company?
Well, he's got another problem, though, right? Because, yes, all that happened, but he took a tremendous hit, and now Trump is saying, well, maybe the federal government doesn't really need SpaceX for anything.
Right.
Right? Because that's how dirtbags do their business. It's always a threat. It's a stick, never a carrot.
Let's go back to, you said that Musk took a hit. I've actually got numbers on this. So on January 16th, Tesla's stock was trading at $426 a share. On April 22nd, this is the date that Musk got called on the carpet by his board. They had an earnings call. His stock price dropped to $227. That's a 45% cut. Consumers, by saying they don't want to be associated with him, they're not going to buy his product, they cut his wealth in half over the course of whatever that is, 90 days, not even 90 days. Now, people who are paying attention will say, yeah, but the whole S&P 500 was down over that period.
Oh, it wasn't down 45%.
No, it was down 15%. And he took a drubbing from regular consumers who said, I don't like this guy, so I'm not going to buy his product. And that is exactly how capitalism should work.
Yeah, but now he's got a problem, right? Because the people who didn't like him before are going to still not like him. And he's never going to get back the MAGA right.
So now he's pissed off everybody.
Well, that's right. And he's got more than one company. And I would point out that they are all very much in danger right now.
Well, I'll say this. From the point at which he stepped back, so he announced he was going to step back from Doge, he starts to distance himself from Trump, Tesla's stock rebounded by about 10%. Now, it has not gained back the 45% it lost, but again, you have the market here saying, we like what you're doing.
I'm interested in what the market tells us about Tesla, but I'm more interested in the sales numbers.
Yeah, I don't know what the sales numbers are, but I would argue that the stock price numbers are more telling because what they're reflecting is what all the analysts believe is going to happen to the sales numbers. So you're getting that information up front.
Yeah, but, right, and there are all kinds of examples you can point to with companies whose share price was wholly out of line with reality for any number of years, right? We could talk about Solyndra if you want, or there's 100 others that we could probably think of right up the top of our heads. So, I mean, look, stock price bakes in all expectations. I just want to see quarter over quarter sales.
Yeah, that'll be coming. But here's the thing. People complain about, well, the problem with corporations is that they're only concerned about profit. And let me tell you, I am much more comfortable dealing with a corporation that cares about profit because I have the control. I have the money that they want. And so long as I have the ability to walk away and people like me have the ability to walk away, we can deny them the thing that they want. It's the entities that aren't profit-oriented that make me very nervous. I have no control over those.
Yep, that's right. And you know, for the people out there who've never worked in the nonprofit sector, the nonprofits are still concerned with profits.
Right. Nonprofit doesn't mean you're not concerned with profit.
No, it's revenues in excess of expenditures, right? And you better have a positive number there or you're not going to stay in business. So that's not exactly it, right? You're really talking about government.
Yes.
And only government.
Yes. Yes. The guys who make their money by holding a gun to your head and saying, give me your wallet.
Yeah, that's right. And look, do I trust Donald Trump? No. Do I trust Elon Musk? Not particularly. Do I think Elon Musk has better incentives to do what I consider to be pretty good things? Yes, he does.
Yep.
The incentives that line up before him all lead him to the belief that he had better make people happy.
Yeah. Now, let me give the counter-argument that people are going to say, and that is that, well, but you can hold the politicians and government accountable the same way, through the voting booth.
Yeah, the same way, please.
Well, yeah, see, this is the problem. I can't hold them accountable. Only 51% of us can hold them accountable. So I might say, for example, I don't like what Musk is doing and I'm not going to buy his product, and that hurts his bottom line. If I decide I'm not going to vote for politician X, but 51% of the people vote for him anyway, I've done nothing. In fact, he doesn't care about me because he's got the other 51%. Furthermore, I've got to wait at least 2 years to cast that vote.
I would submit that it's even worse than that, because if you don't come up with the 51%, the other side does, and they elect people who are, from my perspective, exactly as horrible as the people you wanted me to vote for.
Right.
There never seems to be a legitimate choice.
Yeah, I don't have the ability to walk away.
There's just this group of jackwagons and that group of jackwagons, and in the end, their jackwagonery is all about the same, right? It's just these little tiny things that differentiate one side from the other. Now, if I don't like Elon Musk, or if I don't like his cars, and I do love him, whatever, there are scores of other automobile companies I can go to.
Right.
Scores. Not one, many. And look, there's a couple of them out there that can do no wrong in my eyes. The biggest mistake in my automotive life was made not buying another Toyota.
Yep.
Like an idiot, I went out and bought a Subaru. I was convinced that that was somehow the better thing. For God's sake, it wasn't even close, right?
You talk about walking away from one seller to another, and someone's going to say to you, well, but if you don't like your government, you can walk away. To which I say, absolutely you cannot. No, you can't. You need the permission of the other country you want to move to.
Yeah, but they're all bad in exactly the same way. Then it's a matter of degree, never a matter of kind.
Right.
And on the great sliding scale, the United States is, I think, as good as it gets. And if it's not as good as it gets, it's second or third or whatever by a slim margin.
But notice what's going on here, and I think the U.S. could be, and I agree with everything you've said, but I think we could be way better. And the way you get way better is you allow the people to walk away, and we have the system set up. All you've got to do is back off on the federal government, let the states do more. So that, and our friend Clark Neely said this when he was on several weeks ago, so that life in California looks markedly different from life in Arizona, which might look markedly different from life in Virginia. And you let the states take the fore in terms of governing, and then let the people do in the political realm what they do in the economic realm. If you don't like what's going on where you are, move.
And we would never have the kind of arguments that we have about Trump and Musk or Harris and Biden. It wouldn't be that important.
No.
What would be important? The stuff that happened close to where you lived.
Yep.
Right? And I'm of a mind that everything is ass backwards right now, that we put the most of our concern at the thing that really should be the least concerning.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the way it was designed.
Federal politics shouldn't mean nearly as much as state politics, and I think you make a pretty good argument that state politics shouldn't even hold a candle to your local politics. Where you live, that's where it's important. And yeah, we all live in the United States, but yeah, come on, pay attention. Take my point here. There's a difference between saying, I live in Western Tucson, as opposed to saying, I live in the United States.
Right, yeah.
And Western Tucson should have a lot more to do with my local kind of everyday experience. It doesn't.
Not only different because of your circumstances. Your water rights, I know, are a big deal where you are. They aren't a big deal where I am. We have different circumstances, but you also have different desires. It's just the case. There are some states in which the people are going to want a bigger social safety net, and other ones in which they want a lesser one. There's not a right answer there. There's different opinions. So let all the opinions exist. Let them exist, some in one state, others in other states, rather than having wall-to-wall solutions.
Right, but people whose one goal is to govern over the rest of the people, they don't want that.
Right. The guys who want power want wall-to-wall solutions.
And I said repeatedly prior to Roe versus Wade being overturned that nobody really wants Roe versus Wade to be overturned. What they really want is to have the final say at the federal level, thereby obliterating every other argument by making it all irrelevant. But that's not what anybody actually wanted. What we ended up with, it doesn't help anybody, right? Is abortion legal in the United States? Well, it depends on where. Well, if it depends on where, isn't it kind of de facto legal everywhere? Yeah, kind of. Right, but some people won't be able to afford to go from state to state. That's going to be a very short list given the patchwork of state laws that we have, but it's certainly not going to be zero. Everybody's just irked right now. Donald Trump can't decide what his abortion policy even is. He's never been able to decide. He thought he was doing what most people wanted. The minute there was an outcry, he said, well, it's up to the states. That's all we ever wanted. No, it's not all you ever wanted. What you said you wanted was to make it illegal everywhere and always. And that's the kind of authoritarian that we're dealing with. How do I know that? Because that's always the kind of authoritarian that we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's not particular to Trump. It's particular to the political class.
Yeah, I'm irritated with him right now. Apparently nobody can remember that I was exactly this irritated, well, maybe a little less, but damn near with Biden, that I was irked for 8 years. Under Obama, it was 8 years of nonstop complaints coming out of my mouth. I don't like any of them. And I think we'd all be better off if no one else did either. What can you do? And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time,
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.